Good morning. Good morning. I'll behave myself. Hey, you know what we should talk about this morning? We're talking about real people that Jesus used in his mission. And this guy I never hear anything about. I mean, almost never. You know what I'm going to talk about? Judas. Nobody ever talks about Judas. I confess that when I first read the accounts and the gospel accounts, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, where they talk about Judas, I couldn't really see Judas as a real person. Because if you think about Judas, he's chosen to be on Team Jesus at the beginning. And he's with Jesus throughout his entire ministry. And he witnesses miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle. I mean, every kind of miracle that there is. Miracles of provision, miracles of healing, miracles of somebody gets raised from the dead. I mean, there's just, wow, how many more miracles could there be? They're working on it. Don't you worry, they're working on it. And new soundboard, forgive them. And the question is, how could a person actually turn against Jesus? I mean, if Jesus is really innocent, if Jesus really never did anybody any wrong, if he only told the truth, if he only had compassion, if he only confronted people in love, how could you turn against someone like that? It's hard to view him as a real person. It's almost like he had to have been some kind of be a real person. But what I want to get to this morning is that Judas was a real person, and that there is something to be learned from Judas's story. And I'm going to take you on a little bit of a trip. I'm going to do things a little bit different. I'm going to go to the back of the story and then back up and go in reverse. I'm going to start with the place that Judas betrays Jesus. And I want you to see a few things. In Matthew 27, verse 3, it's written that when Judas, who had betrayed him, it's already happened, saw that Jesus was condemned, he was seized with remorse and returned the 30 silver coins to the chief priests and the elders. I've sinned, he said, for I have betrayed innocent blood. Now their response to that is this: what's that to us? They replied, that's your responsibility. That's on you. This man who had done the deed is so overwhelmed with the shame and the guilt and the remorse after the fact, and he feels he can't go to Jesus anymore, either out of shame or just out of, I can't get to him, it's not safe, and he goes to the only people that he can think of, the religious authorities who got involved in this whole mess in the first place, and says, I can't bear this, it's too much. And of course, they say, well, there's nothing we can do for you, buddy. It's over. Judas threw the money into the temple and left. And then he went away and hanged himself. What I want you to see is that Judas was a person with a conscience. A.B. Bruce wrote this. He said, he was bad enough to do the deed of infamy, and he was good enough to be unable to bear the burden of his guilt. That's real. How's that for real? Right? How many people have had just enough bad in them to go through with something, to create the plan, to concoct the deed, to say the thing that you thought, to do the thing to get back at them? How many people have had that in them just enough to actually step over the line and to do the thing, and then later just be overwhelmed? The shame can be overwhelming. So you could actually relate to Judas a little bit there, if you try. There's also something I want you to see about Judas. I don't know if you've picked this up, but Judas was actually someone that people trusted. Get this. John wrote, a week before Jesus was killed, there was a dispute over a young woman taken this whole pint of the most expensive perfume you've never had before, okay, nard, okay? We find out it was worth an entire year of wages. That's how valuable and precious this ointment stuff was. And of course, a young lady is so moved by what Jesus has said about her and offered her, she takes the thing and she pours it out over his feet to anoint his feet with oil. The most expensive lotion you can imagine. And it's written but one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected, saying, "Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages." But then John writes, he did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. This is the guy everybody agreed was the best guy to hold on to the money. 12 guys got together and said, okay, who's going to be in charge of hanging on to the money? Who's the responsible one, right? Who could be trusted to hang on to the money? And go and make the distributions to the poor and collect the offerings and keep the tally and make sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. Judas was the guy. Nobody suspected Judas. Nobody. Sometimes it turns out that having a great reputation actually works against a person. Do you know what I mean? It can create kind of a smoke screen. When you have a good reputation, when you pay your bills, you're a nice guy, you do the right things, you show up at the right places, you're punctual, nobody has any huge complaints about you. You've never gotten into any real trouble. Your reputation can actually serve as a smoke screen for some things that can be going on underneath, behind the scenes. Because nobody confronts you. Nobody suspects you. Nobody understands the real struggles that a person can be going on, have going on inside of them when on the outside everything appears kosher. And that's what was going on with Judas. Judas was a trustworthy guy, at least on the outside. But what I also want you to see, and this might be the most important part, was that Judas did not betray Jesus suddenly. I know when you read the accounts in Luke 22, here's the account that I went to when I was preparing for this. Luke 22, it's written that now the feast of unleavened bread, called the Passover, was approaching, and the chief priests and the teachers of the law were looking for some way to get rid of Jesus. Then it says, Satan entered Judas, called Iscariot, one of the 12, and Judas went to the chief priests and the officers of the temple guard and discussed with them how he might betray Jesus. They were delighted and agreed to give him money. So you see, when I read that, when I first read, well, then Satan entered Jesus, I have this strange picture of like a person who's just like, an ordinary, unsuspecting person, and then all of a sudden, Satan came along, flipped the switch on the back of his head, and, entered in, plugged in the USB or something in the back of his Android port, I don't know, and just jumped in, and he could just run around in a body and do whatever he wanted to do, and then, shut the thing off. But actually, that's not what's going on. There was something that had begun a long time back, and this is the fruition of all of that time. And I'm going to take you back there in just a second. See, the conflict began somewhere. And what you're seeing now is the culmination of a man who has made himself a little bit more available and a little bit more available and a little bit more available for the voice of the enemy, who Jesus calls the devil, to actually do everything that the devil wants to do with the situation. And I'm going to take you back to a place, it's a tense moment in John 6. In John 6, things in the ministry are going amazing. They are amazing. Jesus has chosen these 12 men. He's calling them the 12. And they have accompanied him all over the area, all over the region. And Jesus is just nonstop, packing the punches. I mean, he's healing people. People come to him with questions, and he gives them answers they didn't even know that they needed. And people have been raised from the dead, for crying out loud. I mean, just wild things beyond anybody's imagination. And as you can imagine, people are going nuts over this. Everywhere he goes, there's a crowd. Everywhere. Not just a crowd, like this is a crowd. I'm talking about thousands, multi-thousands of people who are walking around just because they heard that he was coming through the area. They don't know where, but they're on their way to find him because, hey, if the miracle man can do that for them, I got about 5 things here on my list I could use a miracle for too. And if this is the guy, I want to see for myself. I just want to see. And in the midst of everything going so amazing, some people, just ordinary Jewish people, kind of question him a little bit about some things. They say, hey, what do you mean by that, really? How could you say that? How could you say this? And the thing about Jesus is, he just tells them the answer. And he uses symbolism, and of course, it's symbolism that they may have or should have been able to comprehend, but they weren't because, their minds were warped because of so many things in life. They wanted things to be a certain way, and sometimes they weren't. And so, humankind has a way of sort of warping the way that things are supposed to be, the way that we want them to be. And Jesus is straightening all of that out. And they don't like it. It actually makes them angry. And so this huge crowd of people, he has a lot of disciples. He has the 12, but he has all of these, this following of people who are actually following him everywhere that he goes and trying to learn and understand and take some spiritual training from him like he is their rabbi. And it says, from this time, many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him. And there's this tense moment. It goes on. Jesus says, you don't want to leave too, do you? Jesus asked the 12. This is a moment. You got 12 people here. And you know just as well as I do, if that were you, you sort of know what the answer is, the right answer, but you're kind of like, yes. Are you gonna not do that anymore, though? You don't get to be the leader of the country. You don't put the country back on the map, put the government back on the map. You don't rally support behind you by doing things like that. Every one of us would have a little war going on. You're supposed to be the Messiah. You're supposed to swoop in and kick out the foreign governments and put our economy back together and do all these things. And you can't say things like that. But, says Simon Peter answered him, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. We believe and know that you are the Holy One of God. Well done, Peter. Well done. And then Jesus replied, have I not chosen you, the 12? Yet one of you is a devil. Yet one of you is a devil. Of course you're staying. Of course you're staying. I know how to pick them. I chose you. Surprise, surprise. The 12 I chose are the 12 that are staying. Huh. But that doesn't mean that the 12 that are staying are 12 that are with me. See, I've got 11 that are with me, one is not. I don't know how many of you know, you can have somebody that's staying, but they may not necessarily be with you. People have an awful lot of reasons for staying, and it's not always that they're with the person they're staying with, right? You can separate your heart from somebody and still stay in proximity. People do it all the time. People do it in marriages. People do it in their family, their family units at home. People do it all over the place. We stay because we don't know where else to go. I don't know what else I would do, so I guess I'm staying. But they're not with you. See, Jesus knew in that moment one was stepping off the platform. He calls it out. He calls it out then. But what did Jesus do? I mean, what did he really do to start that happening? What did he do? Jesus betrayed Judas' expectations. Think about that. He betrayed Judas' expectations. I thought you were going to rally all the people behind you, drive out the foreigners. I mean, when I joined on, that was my expectation. I thought you'd be, more presidential. At public. I thought you would be more like this. And so many things have happened. It's almost undeniable to him that this is that guy, but that guy is not coming along with his expectations. And whenever that happens to any of us, we start to feel a little betrayed. And it isn't God's fault. It's our expectations' fault. Because we create our own expectations for what exactly God is supposed to be like. What exactly is God supposed to do in this situation? We've all got a version of Jesus that Jesus is supposed to be. But so many times, Jesus, the real Jesus, confronts our version of him and says, actually, you're not quite there. Maybe some of what you believe about me is right, but there is some of what you have, it's actually more you than it is me. And any of us can be guilty of that. Anybody. That's where things start to go south for most people. I find, this is just a little snapshot of my own experience, but I have talked to a lot of different kinds of people, believe it or not. A lot. I have talked to people just fine, coming to church every weekend. I've talked to people who don't want anything to do with that. I've talked with people who are somewhere in between. I've talked with people who are in great health, never had any real major malfunctions. Their relationships are together. I've talked with people who are laying in the hospital and this is their last breath. I mean, I've talked to such a gamut of people. You have too. And I find that people who are struggling with their faith the most can almost always trace it back to a moment where the Jesus of reality didn't quite line up with the Jesus of their expectations. And they felt a little betrayed. They felt a little bit like the wool had been pulled over their eyes. One of my grandfathers was like that. Went his entire life. If you've heard this story, so I won't tell you the whole story, but he went his whole life. I was having an actual conversation with him in an adult facility about church and faith and all that stuff, and he just explained to me, when my son was born, I never went again. Because his son had been born with developmental disabilities, and they couldn't take care of him, and they needed help, and That was his juncture where Jesus defied his expectations. You know, we all have expectations of Jesus. Some of them actually come from the Scriptures and our interpretation. You know, we read what Jesus said, and we're doing our best to understand that. But a lot of stuff that we carry with us comes from, you know, our parents or our grandparents or something we saw in a movie or something, you know, some sort of thing that we saw on the internet or all kinds of places. You know, I had somebody in my family used to tell me, you know, if you grow up to be a good boy and do all the things you're supposed to be doing, you know, God will make sure that you have all the stuff that you want. And, you know, you'll find this and you'll find this and you'll have lots of money. You know, I'm just like, I'm thinking back on that moment now and I'm like, whoa. It kind of set me up for problems later in life because nowhere does Jesus say, you won't have any pain or suffering as long as you do everything I tell you to do. That's not in there anywhere. But that's an expectation that people sometimes have. I was doing everything right. Why did this happen? They feel betrayed. You know, you come to some conclusions. And in those moments, every single one of us has a choice that needs to be made. It will happen to everybody almost every day of the week. There's something about Jesus that you had in your mind, how he'd handle the situation if this ever came up, how he would come to your rescue and fix everything the way you think he ought to fix it. And oftentimes, Jesus will surprise you. He doesn't do what you expect that he should do or would have done. And in that moment, there's a decision we all have to make. Do I keep propping up the version of Jesus that I insist Jesus is supposed to be? Or do I submit myself to Jesus as he is? Do I submit myself to Jesus as he said of himself? Do I submit myself to Jesus as he actually was? Do I submit myself and say, you're the Lord, now you tell me how you are? You rewrite my script. See, that's surrender. That's what it is to say Jesus is Lord. Will I allow God to define himself? Or will I say, this is the box, and if you don't fit, I'm going to be mad? For somebody listening today, this is a key moment. It's a key moment. Somebody listening here today, you have suffered a major disappointment. Major. Don't compare it to anybody else's. I'm saying major to you. It ruffled your life's feathers, okay? It really just hit you. It shocked you. You just, why? What? How did what? That is not what I thought. And you walked into something thinking you knew what God had to do. He didn't do it. And you might have come to some conclusions. You might have said, you know, he either A, must not be there. He must not care. He must not be good. He must not be for me. Maybe he's there, but he's good, but he's too good, and I'm too bad. He's just not for me anymore. I just made him too mad. What if none of those things are true? What if absolutely none of those things are true? What if you just had an expectation that was built on something that wasn't really him? How he will handle things. I'm not talking about willing yourself not to feel grief. That's pretend, that's a hoax. Okay, don't do that. But I'm saying step back and see, what was I thinking he would be? And then just entertain the thought. Take a step closer and say, Jesus, Jesus, who are you really like? Take a step closer. Get a little closer. What do I mean by that? Find a place to start again. Find a place to start fresh. Find a place to start in the Scriptures and look at who Jesus says He is. What was written about Him? What did He actually mean when He taught these things and said these things? Get yourself a good preacher. Serious. Take a step closer, not farther away. Everybody takes a step farther away. Take a step closer, because you will not find the answer to what you are looking for some other place than Jesus. Jesus is the only person who could convince you what He is actually like. Somebody listening today is in the middle of a war inside. You may even be one of those people who are together on the outside. Right? You pay your bills on time. You show up when you say you're going to show up. Haven't got any real trouble lately. Your friends think well of you. You can have all of that going on around you, but inside you can be going through some terrible wars. Struggles with doubt and struggles with temptation. And the truth is, you're a good worker, you pay your bills, your stuff's clean, whatever. But the truth is, on the inside, you may be clinging to something in your life that you actually know is not Jesus at all. And the longer you go in that direction, the harder it gets to reverse the direction. The longer you go, the more impossible it seems, the more that shame builds up and that guilt becomes overwhelming. What I want to tell you is, if you have that going on today, you know what? It may not have ruined your life yet. But what I also want to say is that when you have things that you are clinging to, and the root of it is that I'm not totally sure I can trust Jesus to provide the lifestyle and the things that I want in my life, so I'm just going to hold on to some of these things that I could shield from everybody else and hide from everybody else. If you're clinging to those things, I'm telling you, the place that they end, the end game, is destruction. It's deceiving, because at first it seems like no big deal. The end game is the absolute, total, perfect ruin of everything that your life is. That's why He's good.
All the time.
The devil is good at his game. It gets you started. It gets you a little conflict. Well, don't you really, Jesus says that, but don't you really want that and that and that and that in your life? Don't you need that? Yeah, I guess so. See, what do? You find a way to do the Jesus thing and to do the thing that's not the Jesus thing. You try and keep your feet on both sides of the line. It's so deceiving how long you can go like that. It is so gradual. But the end game is always the same for everybody that the devil ever tries to deceive. It's your total and absolute and perfect final ruin. See, when Judas gets to that place, he looks and sees what he's done, and he's weighing it. He says he was seized with remorse. He couldn't function. He couldn't get out of bed and go to work again. He couldn't get up and, kiss his wife. He couldn't do anything except nothing. He was caught in this terrible prison of what he had done. Shame just crushing him. And the one place he should have gone to get that made right He didn't go there. So, here you have this hollowed out shell of a person. He knows how to be religious, you know. He's done all the cool things, participated in everything. But at the core, he knows it's not real anymore. And this is a hard message. This is a hard message. And I don't talk about the devil a lot. But that is absolutely the devil's plan. To take you to a place over a period of time, so slow sometimes it will deceive you, that you arrive at nearly the same place that Judas arrived. I've done it. I can't go back. And so there's nothing for me. Might as well die. Get it over. Somebody here listening today, I think that you may feel like you are already there. You won't raise your hand up in church, and I wouldn't ask you to do that. But truth be told, you have something that you're carrying around with you. And you know it doesn't work with Jesus. It just doesn't work with Jesus. But you're so far in, you can't see your way out. It's happened. And you feel very much like Judas would have felt when he went to those religious rulers, the priests and the elders, and said, look what I've done. What's there to do? And they just give you, I don't know, it's your problem. You did it. Don't look at us. You may feel like that. You actually may be right now, you wouldn't admit it, but right now you may actually have thought, what's the point anymore? It's too late. And all of your convictions and all your conscience leads you to the same place. There's nothing. It's too late. I might as well just die. What I want to remind you of this morning is that Jesus already did it, so you don't have to. That's the Jesus we're talking about. We're talking about the Jesus that looked at all of your worst sin, all of the stuff, all of it put together in a wad of your life that says this is how bad and how heavy it is, and said, you know what? I will come down and I will die in your place so that you can be free from every drop of that guilt and shame. You don't have to go down the path that Judas went down. You don't have to go there because of what Jesus has done, because of the real Jesus, the actual Jesus that you're dying to know. I'm telling you, that is the Jesus that we serve and praise and worship here at Faith Fellowship Church, is the Jesus that died so that you would not have to. And I don't care what you have done. I don't care. It's done. If you can come to Christ with humility and be able to confess that to Him and say, this is me. This is the real me. And say, God, I want to know the real you. I'm telling you, your sins are forgiven. You can be forgiven. You can walk away from all of that shame. You don't have to go down to the side of the cliff where Judas went, tie a noose around your neck and throw yourself off headlong. That isn't necessary, friends. You serve a different Jesus than that. You serve a different Jesus than that. You can have a fresh start with Jesus any day of the week. And if that's where you are today, I'm begging you, make it today. Don't wait 3 days from now. Do it today. Do it today. Declare your faith and say, you know what? I am a sinner. I am worthy of death. I don't know what else I would do except beg for the forgiveness of a merciful God. If that's you today, I'm inviting you to declare that in prayer today with me. If that's you, I want you to pray along with me today. And even, I'm telling you what, even if it's not, you don't think that's you exactly, I'm telling you what, you need to make a declaration every single day of your life. I want to know the real Jesus. Rewrite the script. Father, you came to us as Christ. And there is so much about you that we did not expect. We expected a lot, but so much is what we did not expect. We expected you to be confident. We expected you to be all-powerful. We expected you to do whatever you thought should be done and never apologize. We expected those things, but we did not expect mercy. We did not expect forgiveness. We did not expect compassion. We didn't even see our own sin in the mirror. But right now, I want to declare, I am a sinner. I am full of evil. I have done all kinds of things that I should not have done. I have omitted doing all kinds of things that I should have done. And I welcome you to be my Lord. Save me. Save me. Holding out my hand. Pull me up out of the waters. Don't let me drown here. Don't let me go out like this. Let me go with you. In Jesus' name, amen. If there's something about that prayer that was real to you today, I'm inviting you to come up for prayer today, and I'm inviting you harder than I've ever invited you up for prayer today. I want you to actually be prayed over with one of our prayer team that's up front today. Come on up, prayer team. Come on up. And although this is a pivotal moment for somebody today, maybe watching, understand that every day is a pivotal moment. Every day is a day we invite Jesus to rewrite the script and define himself for us. Because that's what it is to make Jesus your Lord. Amen? Come on up if you want.